Welcome to the Valley. I'm Jackie. This is where I've lived for more than 40 years. It's where my ancestors lived, and this is where the books are created. That's wombat proofing, and it's needed. I've got no idea how many books of mine have been published. I think probably about 160, but I stopped counting at 100 because I got embarrassed. I've no idea either how many languages they've been translated into. I stopped counting at about 32. But yep, these are some of them. I always wanted to be a writer from the time I was 3 years old, and I realised books did not grow on trees. Human beings created them. But my parents, my teachers, guidance counsellors always told me, no dear, you cannot be a writer when you leave school. No one can make a living being a writer in Australia. I kept on writing. I wrote my first book at 6. I wrote a trilogy when I was 13. But it wasn't until I was in my early 30s I was desperately broke. I had been making a living as a farmer here. My marriage had broken up. There was a very, very severe drought. I had a baby to support, and I needed $106.44 to register my car. But a friend who was a freelance journalist suggested I might send off some of my writing to try and make money that way. And luckily, I had a wombat to help me. I was using a very, very old typewriter I'd found up at the dump. I'd been sitting on the floor, typing away, you know, clacky, 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 ting, and the wombat hated it. Every night he would give a dropping on the typewriter, and after 3 months of wombat droppings on the typewriter, the letter E was all soft and squishy. So I had to write it without using the letter E, and then I had to fill in all the E's with biro. I went up to town, I went to the post office, I looked up P for publishers in the Sydney telephone book. I sent it to the first one there, Angus and Robertson. I sent it off to them. And the editor picked it out of the pile because it was the messiest, worst spelt manuscript they had ever seen. And she screamed, hey, everyone look at this mess. They assumed that anything as messy as that, as badly spelled as that, would be unintentionally hilarious. So she went out into the middle of the office to read a bit aloud to everyone, so they could giggle at it. She read the first bit, she read the second bit, and then she read the entire book aloud. And 3 weeks later, they had sent me what I regarded then as a very big advance to publish it. And I have been making a living for my family as a full-time writer ever since. Now, the messiness, of course, was not my fault. The messiness was the wombat's fault. But the spelling was. I'm dyslexic. I can't spell. But when I was about 6 or 7, my mother said, look, don't worry if you can't spell. Don't worry if your work always looks like a wombat has sat on it. If your ideas are interesting enough, if you don't let the fact you can't write neatly put you off, most people will concentrate on the ideas and forget about the spelling. And I discovered she was right. Each book probably takes about 10 or 20 years to develop. Something like Diary of a Wombat, she was a real wombat, a very, very, very stroppy wombat. And one day I was on the phone to a friend and she was saying, what's that noise? And I just said, oh, that's mothball bashing up the garbage bin, that's mothball tearing up the doormat. And I suddenly realised that's the Diary of a Wombat. But it took 3 years from there to get a draft. There's always what I call a ping moment, as it was for Hitler's daughter. The things you've been thinking about ever since you were maybe 8 years old or even 10 years old. Suddenly, all of this thinking comes together and it goes ping. And then, of course, you start with the writing and the rewriting and the rewriting and the rewriting and the rewriting and the rewriting. Forget about failure is not an option. Failure is option 1 to 100 when you're a writer or for absolutely anything else. Of course you're going to fail time after time after time. That is actually how you become good. If you can succeed on the 101st time or the 1001st time, that's all you need. Every day I think, this is what I'm going to write today. If I ever thought I have to write a 140,000 word book, I would never, ever, ever write another word. I would be absolutely, completely terrified. I just think, okay, this is the scene I have to write today and nothing more. I never actually research a book. Instead, I find periods of history, themes in history, just so fascinating. The whispers from the past are almost real sometimes, as though they're behind my shoulder saying, look, this must be remembered. And so I research simply because I am completely and utterly fascinated. I'll read diaries, I'll read old letters, I'll read books or manuscripts written at that time. And the stories from our past, if you do it properly, are so much more fascinating than any amount of pretending, just taking a modern story and sticking long skirts and bonnets on it. When I start a book, I always have got a very, very strict outline. I know exactly where it's going to begin. I know the people. I've got every chapter outlined, and I write the ending first. It never, ever, ever works out like that. Every time I start writing the book, it changes because, of course, you've created the characters and they don't want to go there, they want to go somewhere else. Or you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and think, hey, no, they would not have done that. This is what they would have done. But also, if I didn't do that work beforehand, I don't think it would be a very good book. The first idea you get for a book is probably a second-hand idea. It's probably based on a movie you've seen or someone else's book. It's like a second-hand jumper. A second-hand jumper is always just a little bit faded, and it's the same with second-hand ideas. So the more you think about an idea, the more vivid and original it's going to be. Thinking is that important. Writing is that important. Every single person can read. If I can read and if I can write a book, then anyone can do it. Never give up. We are descended from the very few humans that survived the last ice age. We're descended from the humans who survived plagues or wars. Our ancestors were either heroes or people who were good at running very, very fast. And we need to remember that. Humans are good at challenges. The one thing we are not good at is being bored. And once you find the books you love, once you find through books the things that you're passionate about, you will never, ever, ever be bored. Kids don't have much choice in what you do. You have to go to school, you have to go to bed when your parents say so. But when you've got books, you can be anywhere, you can be anytime. When you have got books, you are 10,000 or 100,000 people. It means you can live all of these lives. And once you learn to find the books you love, once you learn to actually write the stories, the whispers in your brain of other times and other people, you're going to find you have got the tools to create your future and the world's future. You are going to stride into the most extraordinary future just with the power of story.